crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with host David Lamb and the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Hello and welcome in to the attorneys. Thank you for joining us tonight. Got a really fantastic panel of experts and an interesting topic, and we have you as well, and we're awful thankful for that. Before we get into our conversation and what we're going to talk about tonight, to get that started, a reminder, if you'd like to join our conversation, easy to do so. That information is at the bottom of your screen, and Hollis Wright makes available attorneys standing by for a live, off-air, confidential conversation. So if, in the midst of the program tonight, a question pops into your mind and you'd like to get speak with an actual attorney about that, you can pick up the phone and give them a call. 844-LAW-TALK is the number you always need to know, so just commit that one to memory. 844-LAW-TALK is the number to speak with an actual attorney if you'd like to take advantage of that tonight. Leading our conversation, a partner at the firm of Hollis Wright, Carter Clay. Good to see you,
Good
sir.
to see you, David. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, this is a topic that we're covering tonight that it's unfortunate that we really even have to cover a topic like this, because it involves the legal rights really of children and perhaps elderly who have been sexually or physically abused by family members. And it's just really tragic and unfortunate that we have adults in society that are engaging in this type of conduct, but we do. Right. And unfortunately, that is just the reality of the situation that we find ourselves in. And when these types of things occur, you can basically have a criminal process where perhaps a family member is charged with a crime, and you can also have a civil process where a lawsuit arises from that type of conduct. And that's really the topic that we're going to be discussing here this evening, and I can think of no better guest in Birmingham and the surrounding areas to dive into this topic than Tommy James. He's been on the show numerous times before. This is an area of law that he really has taken hold of over the last several years. He's done a great job of vindicating individuals and victims of these heinous crimes in a civil context. We'll talk about a civil lawsuit and the criminal context as well. But Tommy, first of all, thank you so much for joining us here this evening, and tell us a little bit about your practice and how you got involved in handling these types of cases, because I've been practicing for 20 plus years and I've never really handled too many of these types of cases. They have some real unique challenges, but how did you get involved in handling these types of cases?
Well, thanks for having me again, and good seeing both of you again. I started practicing in Montgomery about 23 years ago and kind of fell into a niche of representing people who had been abused, neglected, even assaulted, and sometimes even murdered, sexually assaulted in mental health facilities across the state, operated by the Department of Mental Health and Mental Retardation. And these people were being horribly abused and neglected and overlooked, and these are our most vulnerable citizens, and mental health workers were doing these horrible things to them or totally neglecting them, falsifying documents, things like that. So kind of developed a niche in suing state employees like that, and that kind of changed into representing mentally ill, mentally handicapped people, like in group homes, mental health facilities, schools for troubled teens, things like that. And then it just kind of went into just representing crime victims. Now, all my cases pretty much started off, I thought I'm representing victims of crime in every case, so it's kind of a niche I've developed now. Anytime there's a crime, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, there's always the potential of a lawsuit if you're a victim of a crime. A lot of times people don't think about that. You know, they've been hurt or they lost a loved one or something like that. And they're worried about the criminal process, and we'll talk about the differences between criminal and civil. But there's always a case. That doesn't mean a lawyer's going to be able to take the case, but there's always a case that should be looked at.
Throughout your career in handling these cases, and we're going to talk about some of the unique aspects and challenges of these types of cases, but have you found that lawyers that do what we do, which are represent plaintiffs who are victims of either crimes or just various torts and personal injury matters, have you found that lawyers that do what we do tend to kind of shy away from these types of cases, not only perhaps because of the sensitive nature of the underlying facts of the case, but also because of the unique challenges?
There are challenges, and sometimes the ones I was talking about earlier, sometimes you'll have governmental entities involved, so that you got to get around the immunity issues. My staff and I, we've gone through like trauma-informed training, so we have sexual assault survivors that come to us as plaintiffs, and we've gone through training to, it's a sensitive topic like you were saying, a lot of people don't feel comfortable with that, but we've gone through training, so when people come into our office, they're comfortable, we make them comfortable. We don't want to do anything to re-traumatize, re-victimize these victims, so that's one thing about it. Like you said, it's sensitive, and maybe people don't feel comfortable with it, but also the immunity issues that we discussed, those can be difficult if state or local government is involved.
Talk a little bit about the timing of when you typically get involved in these types of cases, because as you mentioned a minute ago, almost all of the times you get involved in these cases, there's typically a criminal component to it. So talk about the criminal component. Are you typically getting involved in these cases after the criminal process has already been initiated or before?
Well, it's important to say that there are often parallel criminal proceedings going on with a potential civil case, but sometimes there's not. Sometimes there'll be a criminal prosecution, but I'll still move forward with my civil case, and sometimes the criminal won't even be, or there'll be a not guilty verdict, or they'll settle it or something like that. But we get involved early, and that's what I would suggest to potential victims out there is as soon as they receive some sort of injury or a victim of a crime, that they approach a lawyer and say, hey, you need to investigate this.
Can I ask just something interesting that you just touched on, and you, Tommy, you look like a pretty young fella, so I don't know how long you've been at this, but these are sensitive cases, you know, and I'm sure it's difficult for some of these victims and your clients to talk about these things. Have you seen a move to being, especially as a counselor and attorney, kind of be more proactive and paying attention to you know, kind of making sure the client is comfortable rather than just going in there with questions to answer like just any regular normal, you know, car accident case?
Yeah.
It is a lot different, and in these kind of cases, and like I said, I've gone through the training, the people in my office have gone through the training. I have clients who have been sexually abused sometimes for years by foster parents or in certain facilities, and it's not reported, and I'll actually get, through our investigation, statements that they've given to child advocacy centers in forensic interviews, police statements, police investigative documents, and oftentimes, and this sounds strange as a lawyer, it's not, but we don't want to actually a lot of times go through the details of this again with our clients unless we have to.
Yeah.
So we glean a lot of the information moving forward from outside sources other than our client. We let them do the if they want to talk about it, we let them do the talking about it. If they're not comfortable, you know, maybe they'll become more comfortable later in the process, but sometimes it just depends on your client.
Right. Interesting stuff. Interesting conversation we're going to have tonight. Tommy and Carter are going to be right back as we head to break. A reminder, Hollis Wright does an incredible job on social media, education, information, subject matter like we're talking tonight, and a lot of other kind of areas of interest and areas of the law as well. So if you follow folks on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, be sure and check out Hollis Wright, a great resource for you there. Stay tuned. We are coming right back.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm, and thank you for watching The Attorneys. We hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: to provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free and off air. So if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury topics, call, email, or text us. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or go to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us button. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us and watching The Attorneys.
The attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show 8 years ago, my hope was we would be able to do what we do best, which is to help people answer real-world legal-related issues they have in their life.
People oftentimes are confronting various legal issues and problems in their lives that range across the gamut of legal practice areas. Bankruptcy, criminal law, family law, just to name a few. And to be able to have a 30-minute platform or format to where we can just cover various legal topics once a week, that's obviously the primary focus of the show.
We love helping people. I think everyone at this firm feels the exact same way, that the reason we do what we do is to help people. And this show gives us the biggest platform possible to help as many people as we can in the community.
Welcome back in to the attorneys. Appreciate you being with us tonight. Just a reminder before we get back to the conversation with Carter and Tommy, if you'd like to take advantage of that opportunity to speak with attorneys from Hollis, Wright, 844-LAW-TALK, that's the number anytime, not only tonight, anytime you need to get in touch with Hollis, Wright, you can do so there, 844-LAW-TALK, and also you see the information at your bottom of your screen all throughout the program tonight. However, you want to engage with us, we'd love to hear from you. Carter?
Yeah, Tommy, so obviously the ultimate goal when you get involved in this case from a civil context is to try and get compensation for the victim, whether it be a child who's been sexually abused, physically abused, or something along those lines. Talk a little bit about what you do to try and identify the individuals or entities that might be responsible for the abuse that the child endured, because obviously the perpetrator, the person who's engaging in the sexual or physical abuse, they may be exposed to a criminal prosecution and could also be held civilly liable, but they probably are not going to have any money to collect a judgment from. Talk a little bit about your steps that you take to try and identify third parties that might have some responsibility.
Yeah, and that's what we do early on. I mean, we want any victim of a crime to come into our office or to call any lawyer to try to get advice for it. But early on in the investigation, we obviously look to see if the third parties, I mean, sometimes the perpetrator will have some wealth. There'll be insurance that maybe we can get triggered. There's some issues with that too. But oftentimes, like you said, we're looking for third parties. In the case of child abuse at a child care facility or something like that, the worker, we would pursue against the worker, but we'd also pursue against the entity who owns the facility. There's agency there between the employee and the employer. Claims we would have against them would be as a result of negligent hiring, maybe negligent supervision, negligent retention, things like this. If they've done it before, if they've molested another child and you knew about it and you kept that employee working for you, there can be some serious problems there. But there's always got to be a third party.
Yeah, other examples might be if the abuse was from a teacher. Then you would be looking at the school system and the teacher itself or himself or herself. Maybe in other contexts would be in foster care homes where DHR, Department of Human Resources, is involved. Maybe they're checking in and they're not identifying abuse that's going on. Would those be other examples?
Oh, absolutely. And I have a number of cases against DHR employees where they've failed to properly vet foster parents, and that's led to years of horrendous abuse and neglect to my clients. I mean, I've got one right now in North Alabama with 7 victims, and they lived in a house of horrors for years because DHR wasn't doing the proper checks. They didn't vet the foster parent. Just a horrible situation. And there are other cases with DHR where Child Protective Services is called about potential abuse and neglect, either from a school, reporting to DHR or hospital, any of the mandatory reporters that are required to report that. And they're on notice that this child's getting horribly abused or neglected, and they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not following up on the investigation. They're not following up with other parties that would know about the abuse and neglect, and they're leaving these children in dangerous situations. And I've had just too many cases to talk about where it's resulted in the death of a child, and oftentimes infants, and just horrible situations.
Now, I know in our firm we handle a lot of motor vehicle accident cases, and typically it involves negligent type conduct where somebody just makes a mistake in operating their vehicle. But I have had instances in my career where the person operating the vehicle was arguably engaged in intentional conduct. They intended to run somebody over, and the automobile insurance company comes in and says, well, we're not providing coverage for that because it was an intentional act. Most, if not all, of the situations you're involved in, it's intentional sexual or physical abuse. Do you run into obstacles there from time to time in terms of insurance companies coming in and saying, well, we're not providing coverage to that person or that child care facility because this was an intentional act?
Yeah, and they do. They take that position that it's a third-party criminal act, so we may not provide coverage for that, and so we won't be able to collect, obviously. But there are theories around that. I mean, there's certain cases that I have where these defendants have a special duty to protect these children, and I take that position in all my DHR cases. This employee here, and there's a couple exceptions in Alabama law where they can be held accountable and responsible for it because of the special relationship they have with my client, and they didn't protect my client. In fact, they caused my client horrendous injuries or even death.
Now, when we talk about DHR and we talk about perhaps abuse occurring in a public school type system, those are public governmental type related entities as opposed to maybe a private child care facility. And this was where I'm going with this, is what are some of the unique challenges that you confront or face when going after a governmental or public entity like those?
Well, you asked about schools, so I'll talk about that. School cases are extremely difficult. Their school employees and educators, teachers are entitled to what's called state agent immunity, and it is very difficult to overcome. We've had success doing it over the years just because we've been doing it for over 20 years, so we kind of know some of the tricks of the trade to get around those issues, but they're still very difficult. It's all the cases. These state employees we were talking about that work for DHR, it's the same type of immunity that county, city workers, and school employees have. And it's challenging, but it's all I do, so I've had success getting around it over the years.
You know how to kind of circumnavigate your way through it. If you can, briefly talk about, when we talk about immunity, what are you looking for to try and overcome a claim of immunity? Are you looking for specific actual knowledge that the school system or perhaps DHR had of the abuse occurring? Is that one example? What are some examples of what you're specifically looking for?
It is. If they're on notice of bad behavior of any kind, whether it's assaultive behavior, violent tendencies of a student, prior sexual assaults or prior bad behavior by a student, they're on notice of that, and there are going to be certain policies of the school board and the school saying you're supposed to do X, Y, and Z. When you have some situation like this, and then I'm saying, oh, you didn't do X, Y, or Z, or this wouldn't have happened, so therefore you're not immune to it.
Yeah, for instance, to give a simple example, a situation where you're involved with DHR and DHR is supposed to go check on the foster child once every 2 weeks, and they're supposed to keep records of that, and you can show they didn't do that checkup. And you can get
oftentimes in these cases, I found DHR workers, mental health workers falsifying those documents.
Yeah.
And that certainly doesn't help. It helps our client's case, but it doesn't help them with the judges. Tell you that. So
let's step aside. This is our final break of the evenings. We have one more segment remaining. So if you'd like to join our conversation, we'd love to have you do so, but a few minutes remaining. So if you want to call, text, email, however you want to get in touch with us, just a few minutes remaining for you to do so. Stay tuned. The final segment of The Attorney is coming right up.
I'm attorney Carter Clay with Hollis, Wright Law Firm. If you've ever been involved in a civil lawsuit or been a witness to an accident, then you may have been asked to give deposition testimony. In this week's Legal 411, we are answering the question, what is a deposition and why am I being asked to give one? Depositions involve the process of a person giving under oath testimony that is outside of court. The person giving deposition testimony is referred to as the deponent. Depositions are taken in the presence of a court reporter, and the court reporter records the testimony. After the deposition, the attorneys for the parties received a typed transcript that contains all the questions that were asked by the attorneys as well as the answers given by the deponent. The purpose of taking depositions is to ensure that the attorneys for the parties have a full and complete understanding of the events giving rise to the lawsuit, as well as an understanding of the testimony that they can expect to hear from witnesses at trial. Another reason an attorney might want to get deposition testimony is that it allows the attorneys to better prepare for trial and to develop a strategy for presenting the case to a judge or a jury. At trial, the deposition testimony can be used in several ways. First, if a witness on the stand deviates from the deposition testimony, an attorney can use the deposition to impeach the witness. Also, if a witness forgets certain facts or events, the deposition can be used to refresh the witness's recollection. Finally, in some instances when a witness simply cannot attend trial, the trial judge has the authority to allow the deposition testimony to be read to the jury. If you are a party to a lawsuit and are requested to give deposition testimony, your attorney will likely spend a significant amount of time preparing you for the deposition process to put you at ease and make you feel comfortable. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Just about 6 minutes remaining in our show tonight. So if you want to get in touch with us, just about 6 minutes remaining for you to do so. Carter?
Yeah, Tommy, I know I've seen you on the news quite a bit talking about various high-profile cases involving the subject matter that we've been talking about here this evening. But can you give the viewers some examples of the types of cases that you've handled in the past, and maybe speak generically about some that you've got going on right now that can kind of drive home some of these points that we're trying to convey to the viewer?
Yeah, there's one right now that's currently pending down in Mobile County where an 8-year-old boy who had cerebral palsy, mentally disabled, our most vulnerable of vulnerable, he had that feeding tube, he was bound to a wheelchair, was being badly neglected at home. The school where he attended, a school for special needs down in Mobile, the teachers there were begging for help to DHR. The child would come to school dirty. He would come to school, and this is hard, but roaches were coming out of his clothing and his diaper. The teachers were so concerned at his school that something was going to happen to him if he stayed with his mother that he had to wear diapers. On a Friday, they would initial his diapers with his initial LR. Those same diapers were on him on Monday. It was that bad, and they alerted DHR to this. The child died, it weighed 23 pounds.
Oh, God.
And DHR had visited the home 10 days prior to his death and didn't do anything. He died in filth. The police are involved. They did a full-on investigation. There are criminal charges involved now. And we have sued DHR, and the workers who were responsible for investigating that didn't investigate it and didn't protect this innocent child. It's one of my most tragic cases, but
Wow.
Sadly, I've got a few like that.
Yeah. So that raises, I guess, a question in my mind as a lawyer, and I was going to ask you this anyway, but the example that you gave really kind of highlighted this point. Who hires you? Because, I mean, typically, and the viewers may not know this, but children who are under the age of 19, they can't contract with a lawyer to represent them. So typically when we work in trying to get compensation for a child, we're being retained by the parent. Well, if the parent is the perpetrator, obviously they've got a conflict of interest there in doing that. But who hires you?
Oftentimes it's another family member.
Okay.
Sometimes the mom and dad aren't together. So if the mom was the one, like in that case, neglecting her son, I actually represent the father in that case. He was not around when all this was going on. And it's usually a family member, a concerned family member, not obviously the custodial parent because of the conflict, but it's somebody, a family member. And I've had a court before appoint a guardian because they've seen such horrible conditions the child's been living in, the horrible things that's gone on with this child. They've actually appointed somebody to hire me, basically. So,
in situations or cases where there is also a parallel criminal proceeding going on against the perpetrator, what kind of cooperation do you typically get from law enforcement in the district attorney's office?
Well, I'm blessed because I'm on the board of VOCAL, which is Victims of Crime and Leniency, and it's a state board where there's DAs on it, there's chief of police, sheriffs, and I get great cooperation from those agencies. The DA offices across the state on these kind of cases do everything they can to help me. The police generally do everything they can to help us and provide records and things like that I'm not sure they would provide in other cases, but they know the severity and just the heinous nature of these. I mean, again, it's our most vulnerable not being protected, and law enforcement generally, they want to punish the perpetrators and hold them accountable as much as possible, and that includes a civil case.
Yeah.
Less than 2 minutes remaining, time enough just for a final thought from the both of you. Tommy, if you would, you go first, please.
David, I was talking about it earlier. I think what's important in these cases is whether there's a case going criminally, if you feel like you've been a victim of a crime, you need to call a lawyer. I said it earlier, people don't often think about a civil case when you've been a victim of a crime, or if you have a family member that's been a victim of a crime. There could be a way to pursue that in civil court for money damages, to hold the perpetrator responsible. Oftentimes the reason victims want to bring these kind of cases is because there's a chance to make change, chance to bring change. Right. If I can get a big verdict or bring attention to DHR not doing what they're supposed to do, we hope that it grabs attention so there can be good and positive change so it doesn't happen to another child.
Yeah, and I think the case that Tommy highlighted in Mobile, what a tragic situation that was, really got me thinking about the importance of family and sort of external friends outside the household. If you see something that's going on, if you're suspicious of abuse or neglect in the household, I know it can be a difficult situation to basically go and inform on a neighbor or a friend or a family member, but there are ways to probably do this anonymously. Right. And I would encourage all of the viewers to be very conscious of that.
Tommy, appreciate you being with us.
Thank y'all for having me.
Tough conversation tonight, but worthy for sure. Carter, good to see you.
Good to see you, Dave.
As well. And as always, we really do appreciate you joining us each and every Sunday night. You've done it for almost 500 shows now, so thank you for that. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.